Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Fourth and Neat. Fred Minnick here, joined by the great Pro Football Hall of Famer, Jared Allen. How's it going, brother?
Doing great. And according to my kids, best dad ever.
I know.
Best dad ever.
I haven't received a Best Dad Ever mug in like 3 years, so I guess
I got best dad ever slippers, but like my kids went through like the best dad ever thing. Like I think it was just like, hey, we're gonna throw this at them. Maybe that'll get them off our backs for a few days, you know?
yeah. I got a trophy, and it was like after I got the trophy, like I don't know,
we're good, Dad.
They stopped meeting as a committee.
I'll be honest, when your kids get into the teenage years too, you stop feeling like the best dad ever because you're like constantly having to correct problems. You're just like,
Oh my
gosh. You're like, where are the guide rails? Can we just, it's like putting up the bumpers for bowling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
Just trying to keep it going down the right track.
Oscar walks to school, and
That's cool, though. At least you live in a neighborhood that can do that.
Yeah, I mean, he walks a good distance, but he walks, and he left his coat at school and walked home in a polo in like 15 degrees. You know? Now, first of all, my first instinct is like, wow, he walked home in a mile. And like, that's pretty damn tough. That's tough.
That's the thing. It's like, you're like, where's the common sense? And then you realize, like, honestly, like, that's a hard part, I think, as parents, right? For me is dealing with, because like my kids are smart, right? And we've never talked to them like babies. So they've always, just communicate well back and forth. So there's this perception that they should have really good common sense. But then, all the science behind it, they're just actually not dealing with a full deck of cards yet because they're teenagers, like, right? There's restrictions on what their brain actually processes and how they process things. And you're just like, so as a child, you're like, come on, like, can we figure this out? But my kids do the same thing. I drive them to school, right? But they have to bring their jacket because if it's above 32, they go outside. And then it'll be 10 degrees, like they'll have their sweatshirt on with their jacket in their hand. I'm like, what does the jacket do? For the short period of time you're outside, put the jacket on. Don't get it. I don't get it, Fred. They just love all being cold.
Now, here's the other thing. I see kids wearing shorts, and then one of Oscar's friends wore flip-flops to the house the other day. I'm like, it's 20 degrees outside, and you're wearing flip-flops. He's like, yeah, I know.
And then you start judging their parents. You're just like, what are they doing?
This kid's dad is like one of my really good friends, and I was like, hey, man, your kid wore flip-flops to the house. And he's just like, oh, my gosh, this kid. It's like we're all dealing with it. And I wonder, like, were we this way, Jared?
100%. Oh, 100%. I can actually recognize that. And I think that's the problem I have in those moments of like, just, I call it aggressive parenting because you're just like, come on, like, and you're trying, and then you step back and you're like, I'm my parent because this is the same crap my dad was going through with me, right? You just don't care. Now, granted, I was hella poor, so half the time I just couldn't afford a jacket. So, or shoes. So I was like, I'm just wearing what I got readily available at the moment. But yeah, man, I was talking to a buddy too, and we were catching up. He was like, hey, what are you up to? We got kids, about the same age. What are you up to these days? We have kids the same age, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, so we're doing the exact same thing. We are literally doing the exact same thing, just in different parts of the country. Let me guess, you're chasing your kids around, you're driving your kids to sports deal, you have school deals, it's that same cycle of like, all right, where does the activity lead me next? All the meanwhile, trying to do a few things for yourself.
Well, big week for me. I just got my author copies of my new book right here. Bottom shelf.
I want to for my shelves.
Yeah, you're on the list. And so, right here, I'm just going to the blurbs, and I got a blurb here from you. Bottom shelf is authentic and vulnerable. As someone who supports veterans, it makes me proud of my friend to be able to put this story out there for people to read. Not all are willing to do so. Jared Allen, Pro Football Hall of Fame defensive end. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you. Honestly, I obviously I haven't had the time to read the whole thing yet. And by time, I just haven't sat down. I'm a slow reader, but I couldn't stop reading it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Honestly, I couldn't stop reading. I planned when you first sent it over to me, like full transparency. I planned to read enough so I could actually grasp what was going on, right, and give a good quality opinion of what you're writing. And I couldn't stop reading it, dude. And I was like, dude, like we're friends. And all of a sudden it was just like, man, I was feeling the emotion in it. And you're like, you understand another side of somebody, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's what I meant by that. Because when people are willing, especially, and that's the thing with like alphas, right? Like a lot of alpha male, a lot of military people, athletes. I think that's why you see such a an issue when people come back from combat, or just even just getting out of the military, right? Or getting out of sports. Like everything for the most part in sports and militaries are very structured, right? We have, this to be done. There's tasks at hand to be done. There's daily things, and it's mostly it's alpha males, right? In those roles, and alpha females, and so to share vulnerable parts of your feelings, or of your mental, isn't always hasn't always been the status quo. And I think that's why so many people run into issues, because they don't either feel safe or have someone that they feel safe
Yeah.
with to share, or there's just that stigma, they're not willing to do it. So when guys like you who have a massive platform do that, I think it touches more people than just military guys. And I think it really sets a standard for just being authentic, and in my opinion, what a real man is, right? A real man is being able to handle anything that comes with them, whether it's on your own or the ability to ask for help and then share your feelings to others. So kudos to you, my friend. I look forward
Well, I
to
appreciate
finishing the
that.
read.
And I started the book in my struggles of coming home from Iraq, because like people always want to know, like, how did you get into bourbon? How'd you become a taster? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going all in. And I couldn't have done this. I was actually really nervous talking about some of this stuff. But I mean, I couldn't do it. I couldn't have done it without, like, building into the talking about it over the years, and like incredible support system I have. So like, you talked about Amy in your Hall of Fame speech. This I feel the same about Jacqueline. And it's the same. It's that same level of like, if we didn't have our wives, neither one of us would be shit, probably.
Oh, for
So
sure. I'd probably just be a piece of it.
we'd probably be like at like a some kind of like homeless shelter together, like fighting over like a pair of shoes.
A piece of cheese. That's my cheese.
Like that movie Scrooged with Bill Murray in it, when
Oh,
they go.
what a great movie. Great. I
Yeah, I
mean,
love
how
that.
many different ways can you portray the Christmas Carol play and just, love every minute of it?
That
I
was
mean,
so good.
freaking great. Bill Murray. Oh, I think Groundhog's Day, another great Bill Murray story.
Mhm. Yeah, Bill
He
Murray,
plays
man,
quite
had hit after hit.
he had quite the run. He had quite the run.
So
Yep.
he's a big bourbon fan, and he was actually out here for a big Kentucky Bourbon Festival event, and
Okay.
he was dancing. He just came up to my wife and started dancing with her, and
Yeah. And
like
you gotta let that ride. You gotta let that go. You gotta be like, it's Bill
oh,
Murray.
absolutely. I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And so I started like, of course, I get my phone out, right? I'm videoing it. He grabs my phone and he throws it
Yep. Of
probably
course he
20
did.
yards into the bushes.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's my Bill Murray story.
Yeah. You're like, cool. I 1 minute you went from being super cool to a super not
No,
so
I
cool
mean, I
dude.
I really respected that, because it's like, it's one of those things where we've got to put the phones down, and
Everybody wants to film everybody, right? And
yeah,
that's why I think why some celebrities get now. Granted, there's certain celebrities that just suck. We can all admit that, or athletes,
yeah,
right? But so many people that you don't ever know what their authentic self is, because there's such guards up, right? Like,
yeah,
so imagine if people did put down their phones and stop videotaping everybody, and just treated people like a human being, would have had a conversation with them. You might be surprised. You might be like, oh, just another normal human being.
yeah.
What are their insecurities, right?
And I know
So,
I know this has happened to you too, but like I was having lunch by myself in the airport, some random city, and I just eating like a normal dude would in a airport restaurant, and I get on Facebook probably about 30 minutes later, and there's a picture of me in a bourbon group eating, and people are like having like comments. I'm like, why didn't this person just come up and talk to me? And
yeah,
it was weird.
Aim catches it more than I, because I just kind of ignore people, right? I'm just kind of oblivious. I just do me. But like, you'll see people like, yeah, the secret video, like just ask. Or that's like, I'll call them up like, if you just ask, I'd take a picture with you. But now
Yeah,
that
I mean,
you're being creepy, the answer is no.
yeah, you should do that. And also you're very intimidating, you're like a
Yeah,
normal.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a little different. It's always awkward when they do this in the bathroom. That's what it's
Yeah, like, wanna shake your hand as you're taking a leak. No? That's actually
That's
never happened to me.
that's legit happened to me before. Like, you done the shake, right? And you're on your way to, like, to the hand washing spot, and I've had, like, people like, it's more than one time, and I'm like, "What is it about me that says I wanna talk to you in the bathroom?" Like, I am a straight looking in the eye, straight looking
Yeah,
forward guy. I
yeah.
don't look at anybody in the bathroom. I
You know
try
what it is?
not
They're
to
like they're
breathe.
like, "Man, Fred's just a normal guy. We're gonna chat it up in the bathroom."
I thought it was really weird he was looking over the stall, but,
Yeah, right? Hey, well, be careful if you're in Minnesota and you got a wide stance.
yeah.
Be careful out there.
By the way, speaking of Minnesota, I did my top 100, the other
I'm
night,
excited. I'm
which was
excited.
this year was, probably the highest level of stress that I've ever had in a top 100 before for a lot of reasons. One, it was so late because I was behind because of my eye surgeries, because of finishing the book, and, it kinda changing my tasting regimen a little bit. I was just really behind, and so here we are, it was January 20th, and I'm doing the top 100, and I'm doing this for 2025. I usually have it wrapped
Yeah,
up by, like, December 30th, and so I'm really behind. I'm getting everything all set up, and there's construction going on in my office building, and somebody cut the fiber into the building,
of
and
course
so
they did,
everyone
yeah.
there who had AT&T fiber lost it, and so I had to move all of my stuff. I'm at the house now. I had to move all of my stuff, all my gear, all the bottles, everything
Ugh.
to the house. So while Oscar may, walk home in a t-shirt for or a polo from school in 15-degree weather,
He
that
didn't do it
boy,
carrying 100 bottles of bourbon.
he was carrying, that boy was like, I couldn't have done it without him like helping me. I mean, I didn't think I was going to be able to pull it off.
One
Yeah,
sec.
real lucky.
Even as Oscars, he wrestles, right? Both sons wrestles?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, see, that's just actually good training for him. Instead of putting bricks in his backpack, you know what I mean? You put
yeah.
you put bourbon bottles in the backpack and made him run.
That's
So
it.
now he owes you for his legs being stronger.
And then later I get arrested for, child endangerment, but
Child endangerment.
his legs will be strong. But
Legs will be
here's the
real
thing
strong.
though, like he is massively strong and he can, snap and get his whole offense is off of an underhook, and
Yeah,
it's really nice. But,
I love it. I
yeah,
love
he
it.
he he legit, like, I could not have done it without him, helping me out. But, so shout out to Oscar for helping me. But,
Good job,
in
Oscar.
this
Way to be a good son, help your old man
right?
out.
Good kid. So we get this all set up. Jacqueline does the pouring. It's a one, it's basically a family affair here. Jacqueline's doing managing the pouring. Oscar helps get everything set up, and then I get the tasting. We go live. I'm an hour late, but everyone understands, right? So I'm going through this tasting, and
You're tasting
I'm
all 100?
I did the top 25. I didn't do all
Top 25.
100.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm going through the tasting, and there's one glass that really, really intrigues me. It's Glass L. Its flavor profile is so different than everything else, and I'm just like, "Man, this is so good, it's so complicated," and every time I tasted it, I fell in love with it more and more and more. Well, what won the competition was, George T. Stagg from the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. Coming in second was, Sazerac, the Rye.
Uh-huh.
Third was, Baumburger's PFG. Those are all 3, heavy, heavy hitters, and coming in 4th was this Glass L that I could not stop thinking about and talking about, and it was an American single malt, the highest ranking I've ever had of an American single malt, my top 100. Joining us in today's show is the maker of that American single malt, Phil Steger, and
Steger. Phil Steger.
Phil
Yep.
Steger.
Yep.
All right, so, like, I wanna redo this.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, right. And so joining us on today's show, Jared, is the maker of that brilliant, whiskey I tasted, Glass L, that came in number 4, Phil Steger.
Hey,
Phil,
Phil,
welcome
welcome.
thank you
to Fourth
guys.
and Neat.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much, Fred. Amazing to meet you, Jared. As a Minnesota guy, I mean, you're just a hero to us. Everybody in our state, we love you for your greatness and the fun that you brought to your greatness and what that
Well, I
did for the purple
appreciate
and
it.
gold.
I appreciate it. Well, we'd like to celebrate authenticity on this show, and after listening to Fred talk about your amazing juice, it doesn't sound like there's anything more authentic than that. Because I know we spoke briefly before went live over here, but yeah, I really appreciate the fact when I remember Fred texted me a couple of days ago about when you came in fourth and bringing you on. I was like, Soda Whiskey Company, that is awesome, right? And so started obviously with your website, started reading about what you guys were doing. And for me, I always like when people take a classic, I don't want to say tradition, but something that it's traditional. Like there's a certain way it's classic, obviously, malting liquor or whatever, scotch and all that stuff. But to take it and then bring it to it out of its element, right? I love when people take something and do it out of its element and recreate greatness using things from local and going about how, the geology of Minnesota really plays into your guys' whiskey making was fascinating to me. So I think, kudos to you for looking outside the lines and seeing what's there in your natural environment and saying, hey, we can try to recreate something great, a timeless process we can kind of stack on top of it and put our own little twist on it. So that's why I love the spirits world, especially like the bourbons and whiskeys, because there's so many ways to take something that's kind of tried and true and expand upon it and make it your own. And I think you've done a great job. I'm excited to taste it now.
Thank
I
you.
gotta get my lips on this at some point.
Thank you, Jared. That means the world to me, man. You can't even know as a fan. And then Fred, really, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do to raise the profile of American whiskey, to take it seriously, to put in. I think people don't understand. I think you do a really great job of trying to bring people along with you. The mental work of tasting like you taste,
Yeah.
the amount of concentration work, especially as especially as the ethanol is starting to absorb in through your cheeks, like you've got to manage that. You've got to manage it all around. People kind of joke, it's like, oh, you have the best job in the world. You're tasting, your quality control. It's like, that's actually the most exhausting,
Yeah.
depleting, draining thing we do, because you're trying to hold incredibly minute, complex details of flavor, texture, aroma in places in your mind, while then you're putting something else into your body, stimulating your senses with something else that's intense, and then trying to hold in place that. So a huge amount of respect to you and everything that you do.
Well, so I couldn't taste yesterday like anything that was like acidic or
Yeah.
bitter. Like it I felt like it was cutting my mouth. Today I can feel my gums are really still sore
Yeah.
from the tasting. Like it is legit like
Yeah.
a lot of work. But over the years, I figured it out. It is something, and I tell you that's why I think that your whiskey stood out so well. Is because there were not imperfections in it, and the grain was so beautiful. Like I kept talking about like you can really taste the grain in this, and like you have to really be a true lover of malt and really how the origins of whiskey to love how I tasted
Thank you.
that night. Now, tell us about Brothers Justice. Like, how did it come to be, and like why the name? And then give us kind of like your
Hey, give us a
your
story.
411. Yeah.
We want the story.
Well, I mean, it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's an extraordinary story for me. It's my life, and everything has led me to this. We have some other things in common that I discovered. I was actually in Iraq in 2001 and 2002 as a humanitarian, doing humanitarian work and trying to get cancer medications and basic food and water supplies into non-governmental organizations to help the starvation problem that was there before the war.
What part of the country were you in?
We were in mainly Baghdad and Basra, a little bit in the north, but the north was a little less secure, a little bit sketchier, and the greater need was in Baghdad and Basra. And after that, I took a job. I was asked by some Benedictine monks to preserve endangered ancient Christian manuscripts in Lebanon and Syria, Turkey. So I was in and out of the Middle East a lot, trying to focus, and I was focusing a lot on what are the things that endure in life, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
think all of us are sort of feeling the fragility of things, like basic assumptions about how people are supposed to behave and treat each other, and basic assumptions about what the rules and rights of citizens and government. Like, there's lots
Yeah.
of things that are like, I guess they don't just last by themselves.
So hold on real quick. So what was your profession before? How did you get into the humanitarian, and then how did you get into
I
the
was a theology
by the
major.
most?
I was
You were
I was a
okay.
theology major coming out of a place of faith for how do I serve?
Yeah.
And how
Okay.
do I serve in places that maybe other people are, that are harder for other people to go serve in. And so all of that was sort of like what endures. And as that work, the manuscript preservation work was done, and I'm grateful it was, because now there are, manuscripts and stories and scriptures and things from people that go back 1800 years that are not going to be lost. And the originals are
Yeah.
destroyed in Syria and Lebanon in the various wars, ISIS.
Yeah, that was one of ISIS's
Biggest.
big
Yeah.
things, was destroying all the Christian artifacts.
That's it. If you want to impose hegemony, right? If you want to say we're the ones in charge, you have to eliminate any traces of freedom or any traces of others' identity from there in order to
Well, that's
say,
crazy. So when I was over in Egypt back in 2009, right, we were going through the country, and it was crazy because you would go through and you would see that, right?
yeah,
So depending on which religious sect was in power at the
yes,
time,
yeah,
they would completely erase the other
yeah,
one. And it wasn't until, hundreds, thousands of years later where, I mean, I can remember you could see where the floor used to be,
yeah. Isn't
right?
that the
And
coolest?
where there were, yeah, where and then all of a sudden where all the, where all the, all the white wall, the plastered, all this stuff was
Yeah,
peeling off, come back to where it was at now. I mean, you're talking 10 feet of like, it just erosion, right?
yeah,
And so, but you would see and you'd peel back and you're like, dude, you would have on the same wall, you'd had all these Christian, drawings, and then you had the Muslim, and then you had all the way back to like the hieroglyphics.
yes,
And it was like the same sanctuary, the same thing. They
yes,
would just eradicate whatever was there before and make it their own.
yeah.
And it was, yeah, you're right. It's about power, saying this is our way. The other way doesn't exist.
That's
This is,
100% it. So it was the greatest honor in my life to be able to do that work. I mean, if I do nothing else in my life, I can say I contributed to preserving something forever, hopefully. But I had to find a job after that and what I wanted to do after doing that work. And I was really thinking about what endures, like what can make a lasting impact on culture, on the way that people experience their lives, and and what are the things that they gather around. And oddly enough, it's whiskey. I mean, I looked back and I was like, there's nothing else in our culture that plays the role that whiskey plays. That's not based in your claimed identity, whether that's a religious identity or a political identity or even a state identity or national identity, but just something that is, we're here. There's this experience in my palate. There's this literal distillation of a land and a history and a culture into an ounce. And the best whiskey, in my view, is the whiskey that's like this massive origami project that takes an entire land and an entire culture and folds it down into an ounce or two. And then when you taste it, it all unfolds and you have a
yeah.
connection to something much bigger and much deeper.
Well, Fred talks about that, right? Fred, you talk about, most people taste through their experiences.
Yeah.
When we were laughing and joking about the marzipan thing years ago, and it's true. I mean, so Fred introduced me. I mean, thank goodness I got friends like Fred, right? Because I remember my comment I made the say I was like, I'm not a Scotch guy. I dismissed his Scotch.
Yeah.
Note to self, guys, don't dismiss things in front of like the world's greatest whiskey taster because they set out to prove you wrong. So he goes, "Oh, you're not a Scotch guy, huh?" And I'm like, "Not for me." I'm like, "I don't like sucking on pine saw. I'm over it." And so he's like, "Well, here, try this." And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I thought I was hallucinating because I was like, I felt like I was like 8 years old by a campfire.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just,
that's
it was
right.
like,
That's
I'm
right.
like, this might be heaven. I think I'm in heaven right
Yes.
now. I'm floating. And what was it? 82-year-old Glenfiddich or something like that.
It was, I believe it was the 60-year-old Glen Grant. I think that's what it
Well,
was.
that was the second one we tried.
That's the second one. All
Yeah.
right. So, all right. It
It was
the
82 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And then I saw the price tag on it and I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, you felt in that moment tasting that, like you're right. You weren't just tasting the spirit, right? You weren't just like, oh man, this is really good. It wasn't satisfying. Oh man, I had a hard day. I need to relax, or I'm not just celebrating. It created a moment and a memory that I'll never forget. And I was just like, oh my, it was a full experience. And you're just like, you could, like the amount of love. I think that's what I try to express to people. And I appreciate, when I hear, people of faith and guys like Fred and talking about spirits is you're getting rid of the disclaimer that if you drink, you're just getting, you're there to get, numb, you're there to get wasted, you're there, Fred's line that we're tasters, not drinkers
Yeah.
is true, right? And I think, Fred puts out a top 100 and he's killing that stigma like, Fred drank 100 glasses of booze. You know what I mean? So because for me, like, especially when you get to the high proof stuff, there's such a challenge of taking something at such a high level and creating so much complexity of flavor in it, right? So to me, that's why I love the blending process of
Yeah.
bourbons on the bourbon side, because at some point the distiller, you're only so many mash bills, right? How it ages, how it blends, how you create this complete of a flavor profile that tells a story about the region, about the person doing it, right? Because that's what whiskey is about. It's a story.
Yeah.
When we get together, what do we share? We share stories, right?
100%.
And so when I see guys like you and I read your backstory, and then obviously, knowing Fred, it is really cool. And clearly I'm fascinated by it because it's out of my element, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm fascinated by it because I'm like, I love ag, I love farming, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so to hear people talk about it in that essence
Well,
is so great.
and that's what it really came to. And you noticed you started to say things about blending and the barrel and all these sorts of things. And that's, as I started to get into whiskey, it was actually going to Kentucky and taking a tour of a very well-known distillery. And the person's bringing me through that. They're talking about, the mash bill of the grains and how they're fermenting it. And he kept talking about mash. And I was like, well, that's beer. He's like, well, yeah. And I was like, oh, well, I drink a lot of beer, but I don't drink a lot of corn beer. And he's like, well, yeah, but this is what we do. And I was like, huh. And then they talk about, the distillation of it. And I was like, wait, so whiskey's beer rain?
Yeah.
I'm a pretty basic person. So whiskey's beer rain. You make a lake of beer, you turn it into a cloud, you cool the cloud off, you collect the drops. So that's whiskey. And it's like, yeah, I guess so. So what drops do you collect? Well, we kind of collect the middle, and then there's a little bit of the heads and there's a little bit of the tails. Well, how do the heads and tails taste? Really bad. Well, why do you put really bad tasting things into your whiskey? Well, over time in the barrel, those bad flavors turn into better flavors. And I was like,
Yep.
well, why don't you just make a really good tasting beer from malted barley and just collect the delicious drops and put that into the barrel? And he's like,
Yeah.
and then he's like, well, so hey guys, so the next stage is
But see, that's what I'm saying. Like the ability to put that in the simplest form.
to the root.
I've never thought. I've taken so many tours, right? And you see the big beer fats, and you're like, oh, this is great. And you just want to like dip a chalice in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're
that's
like,
right.
but then it makes you appreciate the process
Exactly.
from obviously from farming to fermenting
Yes.
a beer product,
Which is ancient,
but then
8,000 years old.
yep, and then taking that an extra step further, right? But then, yeah, I mean,
And I
never
know
even thought of it.
you're an ancient history guy, Jared.
To call it beer rain is hilarious. I love it. I'm
That's
going
what
to
it
call it
is.
beer rain from
But
now on.
distillers
What do you
get mad at me when I say that, but I'm like, but isn't it though? Well, it's more complicated
Yeah.
than that. I mean,
Is
it
it?
is, but it isn't,
Yeah, I love it. I
And
love
so,
it.
back in the manuscripts and all of this. So, the very first written record in human history was from Baghdad, or it was from Mesopotamia. And it was a guy who was talking about malted barley for making beer, right? That's the
Wow.
very first written record. So civilization, all these things tied together. So that was my experience. And then they were talking about the barrel, and I was like, so what's going on in the barrel? And he's like, well, we char it. Why do you char it? Because there's sugar and wood. And I was like, there's sugar and wood? Yeah, of course, that's its blood. And it's like, so you chart, so like it's a creme brulee? Like, so the inside of a barrel is creme. So you're telling me whiskey is beer, rain, oak brulee?
Yes.
And he's like, yeah, so we're going to do you guys all get, so I was the worst guy on the tour. But then in my mind, I'm thinking about where I come from and where you got to live for a while, Jared, and that's Minnesota. And I was like, okay, so we're starting with basics here. Whiskey starts with water. Minnesota's got water. We've got
Tons of water.
10,000 glacial lakes. We're the headwaters of the Mississippi River. If you live south of Minneapolis and St. Paul, the Mississippi River is an agricultural river, right? It drains farmland. But north of the cities, upriver, it is a boreal forest river.
Yeah.
It
Lake of the
emerges
Woods
out of
up
the
there, yeah.
Canadian Shield, and it runs over 642 miles of limestone, and it's just taking on the minerals and all of the amazing things that happen with Kentucky water is happening. It's just happening out in a river in the Mississippi. So I'm like, okay, we've got water. And then I'm thinking about the grain. All right, Minnesota has the deepest topsoils on earth in western Minnesota. I grew up in corn country in far southwest Minnesota, a town called Marshall. And then oak. Oh, well, Oak, Minnesota has the largest native white oak forests outside of Missouri in America.
Yeah.
And we have the northernmost white oak forest. So our oak is slower growth. It's slow growth oak. It's cold growth oak. It's dense. The grains are tight. The structure is really dense. And there's higher concentrations of spice and sugar in that oak. And there's a slower oxygenation process because of the tighter grain. And I
And
thought,
the
all
winters,
right,
I mean, you got less disease, you got a stronger rooted tree because
bingo.
of the harsh winters. Yeah,
All of it.
it's
It is a tough tree. If it survives Minnesota winter, it's a tough tree. And so that was where it really started, Fred. I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to improve bourbon because there's brilliance in American bourbon. I'm not going to be able to improve single malt scotch. There's brilliance, generations of learning,
yeah.
Right.
generations of understanding going back. So I said, so I'm going to have to start something different. I'm going to have to start a new route of American whiskey, a new foundation of American whiskey. And I wasn't thinking in terms of American single malt then. Nobody was talking about it. A couple, McCarthy's was making it, but it really wasn't anything anybody was talking about. I was just thinking about if whiskey's distilled beer, aged in oak brulee, I'm going to make a distilled beer that is about the flavors. I'm going to I'm going to ferment a beer that has every flavor of whiskey that I like to drink that I'm not finding in the bottle today. And I'm going
Mhm.
to fine tune that distillate for the barrel. So I'm going to test my distillate in barrel to bring a harmony of the specific terroir of Minnesota grown white oak and the distillate. And barley just gives me the most control over that process because you can ferment barley into creating any flavor of the produce aisle, any flavor of the nut and spice aisle, any flavor of the herb aisle. You can. That's what people have been doing with malted barley for millennia. So that's where it started.
That's
And
awesome. That's
Jared,
awesome.
as soon as I started talking about Brothers Justice, the fans started reaching out to me. It's like, you got to try this one. You got to try this one. You got to try this one. And so,
Oh, okay.
and so
So it's got a little cult
suddenly
following already.
he's got a cult following. And one of them that people started hitting me with was peated. Like, you have a peated release.
Yeah.
I can't wait to taste that one.
Well, and honestly, so Phil, I was actually fascinated by the peated, like when you on your website, we were talking
Yeah.
about the bogs and it made perfect sense. Again,
Been up there.
I, I got family in the North Dakota, Minnesota area, so I've been up there my whole life, back
Yep.
and forth. Obviously played there for 6 years. And all the wet, you know exactly where's Boggy Mark, all these things, right? But it's like you never thought about that, right? So here you are again, taking, realizing like, okay, the Scotch, there's generational tradition, like that is just steadfast, right? And you can't recreate that anyways. But you could take a lot of the same practices, and you took that right from your own backyard. I thought was super cool. Like
Yeah.
I never would have thought about like the peat moss from Minnesota.
6
Sure,
million acres of it.
yeah,
Wow.
10% of Minnesota's land area is peatland. We have
yeah,
more
dude.
peat in Minnesota than Scotland and Ireland combined.
Yeah, it's funny. As soon as I
Yeah.
read that,
Yeah.
as soon as I read that on the website,
Yeah.
it went right back to old benchwarmer Bob. I used to go up and shoot at his place, and I'd hunt his place up in just north of Hinkley, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
and
where
he
the
did.
that's
He
what
had he
start.
Yes, he had a little 75 cut out on this little, what he called his lake, and I was like, this is just a marsh, and you had to be careful where you step because
You're
you
not
could
coming
step
out.
right through the moss and be freaking thigh deep
That's it.
in crap.
They'll find you 4,000 years from now. They'll pull out Jared Allen's bog body and they'll just be like,
Yeah,
who's
and
this rubbery guy?
I was like, that makes a ton of sense, right?
So then it was like, what can we do that's different, right? So now instead of taking that peat and just using it as Minnesota sources and then burning the peat to smoke them all, here's the Minnesota chauvinism. And people, we Jared knows this because you've known Minnesotans. We love Minnesota. Like we
Yeah.
secretly think and believe that we are the best state. We are the best. We just do. That's what we.
Well, and they hide it behind Minnesota nice,
Yeah.
and it's like sometimes
But
it's
there's
just
a
Minnesota
deep,
arrogant
deep
and
Minnesota
nosy.
pride behind that Minnesota nice. And so this is my literal thinking. I was like, well, Minnesota peat tastes better than Scottish peat. But if I'm just burning it, how will anyone know? I got to
Yeah.
find a way to use peat and whiskey where you can actually taste the peat so that people can know once and for all that Minnesota peat is the most delicious peat. Like that's literally my thinking. So I invented a way of what we call cold filtering. And think about it this way, Fred, it's like the Lincoln County process. of
Mhm.
maple charcoal filtration, except we don't fully activate the carbon. We're not fully charcoalizing the peat, because then you're just eliminating all of the organics, like the specific terroir. You're just burning it off. So we partially activate it. And so we filter it through the peat, and peat is an extremely powerful adsorber because of the
Yeah.
ion exchange that it has. Peatlands are what purify our groundwater. Without wetlands
Yeah.
and peatlands, we have dirty groundwater. We have dirty drinking water. So I thought, all right, I want to use the filtering powers of peat on the whiskey, but I don't want to go all the way activated charcoal, because that strips out the lipids and the fatty acids and the elements of flavor. And then if we also partially, and we found, so we didn't fully activate it. And then what happens is there's a very, very small amount of dissolving of 8,000-year-old plant material, lignans. These are, black spruce trees that were growing when woolly mammoths were walking the earth. And I thought, I
Right,
want
he went there. We're
those
going there.
flavors
Fred, we're
in the
about to go
whiskey.
there after this.
So,
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Phil.
Yeah,
So
it's time.
we
sorry,
haven't
did I
brought
just
you
walk into? Did I just spring a trap?
brought you into the another segment we do on this show. We like to bring all of our guests outside the realm of what they are known for and what they major in, so to speak, and bring them down roads of conspiracy
Yeah.
theories. Like we like to get weird sometimes. And I know, I'm sorry to the listeners who just interrupted Phil. We're going to get back to that because that's amazing. But you're going to think on this for a little bit. There's a whole world of people that think dinosaurs aren't real.
Yeah,
So we're gonna jump into it. I want you to fit. I want to hear about the black spruce and all the peat moss process, but then we're gonna get into where you land on dinosaurs. And clearly, I think I know where you stand, but we're gonna go down that rabbit hole.
I mean, since you brought it up, let's just get straight to it, Jared.
Let's get straight to it. All right,
Yeah.
guys. Sorry. Listen,
mean,
I'll talk, Phil. We're going to talk all day. I'm going to come visit the distillery because
I
I'm
feel
super
like
fascinated. But we got to get into some dinosaurs now.
Phil's touched ancient texts, and he's someone very close to the earth. And Phil,
All right, so
what do you
I
think?
land decidedly on the side. I like to believe what's under my feet. I like common sense. I like to believe what I can see in the real world that I touch and encounter. And the earth itself bears the record of dinosaurs. Like it's like that's you read the earth. The earth is a book. It writes down the things and it records everything that happened. Erosion will wear out some of that, just like if you leave a book to molder. But if there's pieces of the book left, or there's pieces of earth left, it will bear the imprint of the things that lived there, the things that grew there. And so I tend to believe stuff like that. And the people that I've seen, if you go to South Dakota and you go to the Badlands and you can see the fossils, that's the earth tells me that, in a very direct way, that dinosaurs were real. Now,
Do you think the recording of the
really picture that, but I believe it.
Do you think the recording of having like been a part of like artifacts in your past life? Do you think that the recording of like how long ago they were here? Do you think that's accurate, or do you think that sometimes there's some error in?
Well, there's
in some
always
of
going to
those?
be parameters of error. When you guys were talking about raising kids, my dad, when I was raising kids, going to have my wife and I were having kids. My dad was a psychologist, community mental health and public mental health, and his clients all came either from the juvie or from the state hospital or from prison. It was all the people who couldn't get help until something pretty bad had happened. And he told me, he said, "Well, Phil, when it comes to raising kids, just keep it between the ditches." And he said, because there's two types of parents, the kids that I take care of, or the kids that I see, have one of two kinds of parents. The kind of parent that wants to hurt them. And if you want to screw up your kid, you can. And unfortunately, there are some parents out there that want to screw up their kids, or they try to make their kids perfect and have everything be perfect for their kid. Those are the kinds of kids that I see. So just keep it between those ditches. So I ascribe to the keep it between the ditches philosophy of life. And so there's keep it between the ditches in terms of the accuracy of telling the years and the ages of when these fossils were.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So as a man of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
I try to go back and look through scripture to see where I'm going to see mention of potential dinosaurs, right? Now, I'll yield to a crocodile, ancient dinosaur, I'll yield to, maybe a sandhill crane as an ancient pterodactyl, or, a new version of a pterodactyl. I don't know. Okay. We'll say the birds have heard of all that stuff. I'll be honest. I'm not trying to go down a conspiracy theory. I'm just like, I don't necessarily believe the world is, 200 billion years old either, you know?
Well, I definitely
You know,
don't. It's the
like, so
Earth is
that's where,
4
and I'm
billion
like,
years
people go,
old, though.
carbon dating or this, that, and the other. And I'm like, okay, but who made carbon dating? I'm under the impression anything man touches, it is flawed by man, right?
Sure.
So again, you see these T-Rexes, you see this, and I'm like, we have written texts that go so far back into the BCs, and I'm like, I've still yet to been sold on, where was the T-Rex?
So the
Where
T-Rex wasn't around 8,000 years ago when the first texts were being written. So human beings
I
didn't develop the ability to even write anything down until about 8,000 years ago. And so when I look at it, like, and I'm a person of faith too, and what I see is in Genesis, God makes the world, and the people who are writing about this, they weren't there when God made the world, but they believe and they know that God made it. And so they write it down, and then they have these days. And then so the writers
and
who are
we don't know what a day is for, a day could be 1,000 years for Christ, for
well,
God,
they're
right? We
not
don't
trying
know
to
that.
get specific about how long the day is. They're just saying there was a day when all this came to be, and it came in some kind of order. And they're not trying to, I think actually the Bible writers aren't trying to be presumptuous about knowing how and when God does things. They're just trying to write down what God has told them about what the life that they're supposed to live. And so when I read the Genesis, I don't think they're trying to say, oh, I know I was there when God made the world, because you weren't. You didn't come till the
Correct.
later days. So they're just trying to write down God made it and called it good. And it's full of all of these things. When and how and the exact precise way that God made these things, they're not speculating. God speaks, it happens. The actual mechanisms, that's God's choice, not ours. And so that's the way I read Genesis and find it compatible with theories, and they are theories, right, of how old the world is people using their eyes to read the earth and saying, well, when did this form? And then using science and trying to figure out and problem solve, how do we find out how old this thing is? Well, we know these things about this. So it's a progression of reason, trying to use our senses ultimately, and then our ability to think reasonably about things to try to get estimates and theories that make sense. So that's how I integrate those two things.
Yeah, but that's very logical thinking. We're trying to be unlogical over here, or illogical, whatever you want to
That
put
would
it.
be how,
We're trying to get in the weeds and be like, is it possible that dinosaurs are fake? I mean,
I mean,
are
sure
those
it's
plastic
possible.
bones we're seeing in the
It sure is possible. Is it possible, Jared, that
How did they not?
is it possible that I can prevent you from reaching the quarterback? I mean, it's
That's probably not
possible,
happening.
but not very likely.
Well, I mean, all things through Christ is possible, but you would need a miracle
That's
on
what
that
I'm
one.
saying. It's possible, but it's not very likely.
I just look at it and I'm just like, okay, again, and then again, I don't know. I just it's just very convenient that a meteor struck the earth and killed everything, right? I'm like,
It seemed
okay,
very inconvenient for the things that were alive at the
well,
time,
yeah, but then
because they all
so then
died.
so then
I
but the
don't think a
Bible doesn't say
dinosaur would
God
have seen it as
recreated the
convenient.
earth again after this. Like, I fully believe that the Bible that God repopulated the earth through Noah and his family after the flood. So I guess that's why crocodiles survived. You know what I mean? There wasn't a T-Rex on Noah's Ark, Phil. At least they didn't say. I'm not so sure. There wasn't a Velociraptor on the Ark. And I'm totally playing devil's advocate on this just to have
Well, I
fun
don't
with
think
it.
the Ark would have made it if those things are on there.
Neither
I
would
That's what
any
mean,
of
I'm
the people.
you
saying.
know,
There wouldn't be any food,
I
any
mean,
people.
Well, we do know there are manuscripts from the Middle East that do, from various places of the Middle East that do document a flood or carry on a tradition of a flood.
Correct.
That are not just from the Hebrew Bible, but are from Babylonian texts and Sumerian texts. And any human living memory of that flood would have been pretty recent, right? We're talking about a couple centuries at the most, maybe 1,000 years here or there. And the kinds of age of the earth that geologists, like ask someone who's in
Yeah.
the oil industry how old the earth is. They'll tell you how old it is because they're making money off of it, right?
Yeah, true.
They're
That's
making money
where
off of saying, hey, there was an ocean over here that had or there was a huge marsh, and that over time, over millions of years, turned into petroleum. So the entire oil industry is based on geologists, a lot of whom are Christians, right, in Texas and elsewhere, who may have certain beliefs when they go to church, but they're making their money every day on the belief that the earth is
that's
billions
that's
of
what I was
years
gonna say.
old.
I'm like, how devout is that belief system?
they
They praise God every time they strike black gold. I
forgetting
tell
the
you that much
Lord
for
when
sure.
they're putting the pipe down now.
Well,
So I'm just saying.
that's always a conflict between Christian and secular belief systems, right? Is that the world is X billion years old, or
I
so
don't
many
find it a
million years
conflict.
ago. And so, to be honest, I mean, it's always been a conundrum of mine is how old is the Earth, and
Well, come back to Minnesota. You and I will go north.
I'm with you.
I'll introduce you to
I'm
my
with
buddy
you.
Doug Green, who's a geologist, and he was a
Okay.
gold prospector in Alaska, and he actually founded the company we get our peat from. We'll go to the
Okay.
bog, and we'll start sifting the layers, the ancient layers of
I just often
Minnesota
wonder
past together.
if the carbon dating and the dating system created by man is flawed, like to where we think it's X million years old. But again, I go back to the time frame of God. We don't know, right?
And
We
I
know it's
think,
And
infinite.
Jared,
what
too,
does that
like
translation look like? Was it
some of
65 million
that
years?
has
Was it
been,
10,000 years ago? Who knows?
and I
Well,
would say
they
that a
do.
lot of that has been opened up because of changes in like how they name dinosaurs and like how they have there used to be archaeologists who said that they would never find flesh on dinosaurs, and they have
Yeah.
since found fossils with flesh. They have found
Feathers.
feathers. When I was growing up, they were lizards. Now
Yeah.
think one of the issues that have really opened this up is that the media community brands things. They'll take like a study and then they'll brand it as fact, where the people who present the study never say it's
Yeah.
fact. It's like, we
I think that's a
have
fair
evidence
point.
for this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like milk causes cancer one day, and then the next day it's good for you. It's same with alcohol. It's like,
Yeah.
when it comes to the actual evidence and science and how it's presented, no one's ever saying it's fact.
Yeah.
It's the people who interpret it that turn it into fact. And that's what that's to me is
I think
like,
it's a
that's
really,
what
really fair
opened up.
point.
Yeah.
And
I
that's definitely a journalist perspective. You understand how journalism works, Fred, like of how people
Yeah.
take these and report on these stories. And the scientists are saying there's a level of there's a level of probability and there's a level of error in what we're trying to do. So we're not going to come forward and say anything.
They're staying between the
definitive, but it
ditches.
sure seems to point in this direction.
They're staying between the dishes. I'm just curious. I am one of the if I don't think dinosaurs and humans lived at the same time.
Me neither.
I think,
I
I think
100% agree.
I think the Flintstones have been debunked. You know what I mean?
You heard it here. Stop
100%.
living in the Flintstones myth. Stop believing the Fred and Wilma
Man.
lie, people. That
the whole
dinosaurs and people live
cavemen
together.
and dinosaurs live together. Fake news, people.
And
But
don't
again,
believe
I'm
that
just-
people drive cars with their feet. This
Yeah,
is
well,
another part of
yeah.
the Flintstone
clown
propaganda.
cars for sure. Clown cars do for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I obviously I'm not on either side of the fence here. I want more evidence, right?
How about this,
I don't think
Jared?
dinosaurs lived so far long ago, because I personally don't believe the world is that old, right? I don't believe the world is as old as scientists proclaim or say, based on obviously my own personal belief system. But yeah, when you see a big pile of bones put together, you're like, it's probably pretty substantial evidence that they exist, like the La Brea tar pits and stuff like that. But I also then go back and I like to use other people's arguments against themselves, right? If you look at the time it takes for something to evolve, right? And I don't like the word evolution. I like the word adaptation, right?
Yeah.
You see it in moths, right? Like the spotted moth or whatever,
Yeah.
lives in a certain environment. Things will adjust to survive. I get
Yep.
that.
Yep.
You want to call it evolution, I call it adaptation. But the time to evolve from, and let's just take the Big Bang Theory, right? Let's just even take religion out of it, right? You go, the evolution time span is so vast, and I guess that's why they come up with billions of years old,
Yeah.
right? Or hundreds of millions of years old. For it to end abruptly, whether it was meteor strike, flood, whatever you want to believe that the extinction of dinosaurs was, how then did life then start to evolve and recreate back into what we were? And all of a sudden that genetic species was just left off. You see what I'm saying? Like it was just
Yeah.
so, or
I mean, the theory
so that to
as
me,
I understand it, is mammals were small enough and they were adaptable enough at that stage to survive it.
right?
The bigger,
Yeah. So by chance, I guess, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, was it?
But
really?
God,
We're
but
just,
in my personal belief system, God can guide through chance.
100%.
That's
But
how I
always try to attack people meet them at their own, belief system. And I'm always like, I just don't know. Like, it was just chance that these massive dinosaurs were created.
I'm a
and that
big
didn't
Lord of
happen
the
again.
Rings fan. I don't know if you like the Lord of the Rings, but they always talk about if chance it was. And by chance, Bilbo found the ring. If chance
Yeah.
it was,
Hey,
right?
I love it.
So that's my phrase for it. It's like, yeah, by chance this happened. If chance it was, or is
By
there?
the way,
or is there a larger purpose behind it all? And that's
I
what I
love
think.
it.
Did you know? So
I love
speaking
it.
of these like weird kind of factoids, I just learned the other day that we share 60% of a banana's DNA.
Yeah,
You know that?
makes
And did
sense.
you know if you eat too many bananas, there's actually high levels of radiation in bananas?
What?
Yeah, bananas, it says potassium, but if you eat too many bananas, you
Yeah,
could actually expose yourself to higher levels of radiation.
yeah.
Mm.
And
I love that.
you know why bananas are bad luck for boats? You
Why?
know, you cannot, like on a ship, you're never supposed to have a banana.
I don't know.
Oh,
You
because
slip?
they because of the sugar content, they ferment. You know, the banana on a table browns real quick, right? And so obviously everything was always traveled in the hull of the boats, and so the bananas on long trips, like months journeys or whatever it was to get to the marketplace, the gases would, you know,
Yeah,
they would
off
decompose,
gassing,
methane get off
and they would
gassing, and you
destroy
create
the other
fires,
fruits and vegetables that were there.
and then someone lights a cigarette, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
boom, next thing you know,
So
your ship's
I
on fire.
thought you were gonna make a joke,
Manure the
Jared.
I
same
did
way.
too.
Oh, no,
Both
no,
Fred and I
no.
thought we were being set
No.
up for
I thought you
something.
were setting
That's
up
why
a
every
joke.
time I go fishing, right, they're like, no bananas in your cooler, right? I mean, there's no bananas on boats. You have
That's
to be the
right.
captain. And that's why I'm
Interesting.
like, guys, we're out here for 2 hours. My banana's not going to turn into
Well, the
methane gas.
fermentation thing, this is big news. I don't know if you guys caught this covered this in the podcast, but you know, with the discovery, they've now tested and observed that chimpanzees drink the equivalent of 2 drinks a day through consuming fermented fruit. And
Yeah,
that's
it makes
something I've always
sense.
believed in, the adaptation of why is alcohol such a part of our cultures, a part of our lives? Why is it different from THC? Why is it different from all the other things that are there? And why I was always skeptical whenever anybody says, oh, you can't have more than, you can't even have 2 drinks a day or it's bad for you. Well, all of our ancestors, in my view of reading evolution, there was a time when no mammals could metabolize ethyl alcohol. And then there was an adaptation, which meant that those ancestors would have had to pass by most of the fruit that exists in the world, because you don't come across, most of the time, you're not coming across fruit on the day it's perfectly ripe there sitting in the
Yeah.
tree. Most of the time, you're coming across it on the ground where atmospheric yeast is already starting to ferment it. And so at some point, our ancestors had to adapt the ability to metabolize ethyl alcohol. And as soon as it did, there became a much more abundant food supply for them. They could take food off of the ground, eat it, and not have to keep searching for food. And then they started to discover that it made them feel good, and they really loved the other
Yeah.
other
They're
apes they were
man, I
with.
feel so good. I don't have to worry about the parasites I
That's
just put
right.
into my stuff.
And then
You
they'd be
know what I
like,
mean?
Jared ape, you think we can take those apes on the other hill? They look like they got a lot more fruit trees. You're like, we can totally take those guys.
Yeah. So
Let's
they
go.
start conquering people. See, there we go. By the way, Fred, we
And
are
then we'd be like, I
successful in our
love you,
mission.
man. And then we're like, we're the best ape people in the whole
Full
hillside.
emotion. That's how emotion was developed, through fermented fruit. Write that
I
down. That's
mean, I think
science.
we've solved it. I think we've solved it. People
And
let's
Fred,
make sure we get the transcript of this and send it to Nature magazine.
we
And
So
successfully
Phil,
brought.
we had a past guest who claimed to be who was a time traveler.
Yeah,
So all we
Wow.
got to
yeah,
do is get Dr. Swerdlow to go verify these things.
Yeah, I don't know why
100%.
you guys didn't think of that before. Thanks, Fred.
And Fred,
I mean, Jared,
we were
that should have been
successful.
obvious to you to do that test.
We were successful in bringing an American whiskey distiller down the rabbit hole into a logical conversation
It was
of
awesome.
dinosaurs, the existence of, or the time frame of which the Earth exists in,
Yeah.
and and now the adaptation of fermented fruit and how we decided to conquer and create feelings at such a primal age.
Yeah.
Well,
It's what brings us together today.
it all starts with really great whiskey coming out of Brothers Justice, man. I'm telling
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that your whiskey's incredible. And so Jared, I just bought this at a liquor store. Like, it's not like their PR
Yeah.
company sent me samples or anything. You know, I do that. I go
Thank you.
go into the store and I'm like, all right, never heard of that brand, never seen that one. Because sometimes, I get sent stuff, sometimes I don't. But I saw this, like, all right, let's do this. So
Well,
I tasted it.
I appreciate it. We're
great.
going to send you some more just so you can kind of experience the line. And I know as a National Guard vet and as a vet, I'm going to send you a bottle of Commander's Own. So
Awesome.
the
Yeah.
34th Infantry Division Association, which raises money to support soldiers, both during deployment, after deployment, and their families, they actually approached me. It's pretty humbling and pretty honoring thing for a colonel to come and ask you to say, hey, the 34th Infantry, the division, the Red Bulls, we have a proud history in American warfare and defending American freedom. And we want a whiskey that represents our spirit. And we think that's you.
Oh, that's cool. That's super cool.
Make this for us. And so I'm going to send you the proceeds. A portion of the proceeds goes and actually goes back to the association to support soldiers, particularly in post-deployment situations. And it was a pretty amazing experience at the table I'm right now to have a retired 3-star, a retired 2-star, multiple retired colonels and majors sitting around and blending. They actually approved and put this blend together.
That's
It
awesome.
wasn't me saying, hey, do this. It was me inviting them in with our head distiller and master blender, James Jefferson, and putting out blends and barrels and then putting it together. And old habits die hard because all of them looked at the 3-star and said, what do you think? He was like, don't worry about me, guys. Yeah, but which one do you like, sir? Well, I kind of like this. Yep, that's the one we're doing.
That's funny. That's funny. You know what, Phil? One thing I've noticed just through this conversation, everything you do is very intentional, right? And I think that's the secret sauce behind why, Brothers Justice is going to be already is clearly such a great brand. And I can't wait to try it, is because everything's done intentional for a purpose, and you stick to that track, right? So
Yeah.
for this bottle, for this pick, for this line, we're going to do X. Now we can come over here where I think so many people create lines just to expand shelf space, right? And I think that's where you see the downfall in a lot of brands, or the degradation, if you were, that's probably the wrong word I'm using, of a product, right? And because it becomes about shelf space, it becomes about the end result. And you seem so hyper focused on the front side of things that you can't help but put great juice into a bottle. And that's the same approach we take with Full Ride, right? We let that lead the way, but you're doing it on such a higher level because you're actually creating it from the ingredients all the way down to the barrels, to the line. And to hear you talk about what you're doing with the vets is amazing, because that's going to be a core memory for them, right? Like, that's something when they look at that, they know they had that created. Like, it's not just, oh, we're raising money for this. No, they came into a different world that they're not used to, and they created it.
And we don't distribute it
that's
widely.
So cool.
We really want the Red Bulls to feel like it's theirs. So we sell it at the PX and the BX in a handful of stores, because we want the Red Bulls to really feel themselves in this. It's amazing. People you don't know, but who are in the Guard, when they see that, they change. They see the Red Bull emblem and they're transformed. So it's an incredibly honoring and humbling things for us to be a part of. And I just want to kind of just unpack really quick, as I know you guys have your show to run, but I just want to kind of peel it back a little bit about how we make our whiskey and what makes it a little bit different, because I think it's going to explain a lot about why we're able to do what we do. We're super simple. We're single grain, single malt, and single wood. Everything is pale ale malted barley. We don't even mix we don't do any specialty malts. It is pale ale malted barley. That's the only grain that comes to our silo and that we mill on site. We use one yeast, distiller's yeast. We don't do specialty yeasts. We create the conditions for the fermentations that get the yeast to perform the way that we want them to. And I think about our beer as a pantry, right? And as a larder. Through the fermentation, I'm building up bananas and cherries and walnuts and hazelnuts. I'm building up cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, black pepper. I'm building up butter, cream, right? I'm building up these flavors through the fermentation. A 7-day slow and low fermentation in order to get the yeast to produce this incredibly rich larder or pantry. Because I approach making whiskey like a chef, like I learned in the restaurants here in St. Paul, working in kitchens. The way chefs approach flavors, like, what are the flavors, the textures, and it has to be a complete package. It can't just be good taste. The mouthfeel has to be right. The structure of it has to be right. The progression of flavors has to be right. And so then when we take that beer, we actually do 5 different distillations. So we'll do a heads cut distillation. We'll then we'll stock up all of our hearts cut distillation. And then we'll catch all the heads, we'll catch all the tails, and we'll build those up. And then we'll redistill those and do really precise. So we're different even from the American single malt makers that are out there, because I will distill between 175 proof. And the reason to do that is to be precise in cutting the exact flavors and the exact textures that we want in our whiskey. If we're always at 160 proof or below because of a regulation, maybe that works for bourbon. I'm not qualified to opine on bourbon, but on a pot still with a column, I can pot distill it, batch distill it, and then use that column to get really precise cuts of fruits, spice, floral, and different. And so we'll actually do 5 different cuts of the same beer in order to concentrate the specific potential flavors of that beer. And if we just do a raw one size fits all cut, there's fruits and there's herbs and there's spices that we're just sending down the drain. And I don't believe that's the right way to do it. So
Well, Phil,
then we barrel that separately. So we'll put and it's about 80% is heart's cut, but then we have 20% of these various different cuts of the heads and tails, which concentrate the bright tree fruit flavors, citrus fruit flavors, dried spice flavors, fresh herb flavors, creamy textures. And then when we put our blends together, it's just different proportions of those different barrels at slightly different ages. That's able for us to get these really,
that's
really
awesome.
specific, complete projects. So
And
the whiskey that you drank,
do you guys cold filter? Do you guys cold filter all of them?
We don't do cold filtration because you strip out too much of
No,
everything.
I mean, you were talking about filtering through peat moss. Cold peating. Sorry, cold peating. Is that only on your peated?
It's only on the peated right now.
Okay.
Although we are thinking about developing and using it for everything we do. That may be down the road. And so what that allows us to do, Fred, is that whiskey you drank was a mix. The oldest drop of whiskey in there was just over 3 years old. And 33% of the whiskey in L was 18 months old.
Wow.
And I just don't think anybody else is doing anything like that.
So that beat like a couple like 18-year-old American whiskey. I mean, that beat a lot of really well-aged stuff.
And it's because of the intention, Jared. Like
I will say too, like that whiskey is like absolutely aligned with my palate. And throughout my career, I have always I've never liked the over oak stuff. Like a lot of people like it and think it's sweet oak or whatever. Like I have a genetic disposition where like too much oak, don't like it.
Yeah.
And I love grain.
Yeah.
When something is done right, like St. George used to have like, he used to do his single malts, like, and you could just taste like the grains well.
Yeah.
And, that's a good comparison for me with you.
Appreciate that. I love the folks at St. George. They're amazing people.
I love the fact that Phil has probably the best vocabulary we've had on this show.
Without a doubt.
And I feel like I need to go and read a thesaurus now because, I'm over here using Neanderthal language.
Well, listen, we're here to grow, Jared. We're here to grow.
I'm with you. Listen, I love it when we can take something from our guests. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And Phil's vocabulary, I just drew me in. I'm just like honestly, it's like reading a great whiskey book right now. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by everything you guys are doing up there. I really do want to come check it out next time I'm in town.
You're welcome anytime.
And so, what a great story. I feel like you might be one of the most interesting men alive. I feel like you've lived a lot of different great places. Like that's a whole other podcast about talking about the recovering ancient scriptures. Like that's.
I know
I could go down that rabbit hole for ages.
Yeah, I feel very lucky.
Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do like to think I was kind of digital Indiana Jones. It's kind of the feel. I really appreciate it. It's been an incredible life, an incredible journey. And I realized I didn't answer your first question off the bat yet, which is who's Brother Justus?
Yeah. Well, wasn't he a monk?
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
So Brother Justus was a Benedictine monk at the college where I went to, at the Abbey where I went to school up in central Minnesota at St. John's, right?
Yeah.
And the great football program for years, the winningest football coach.
D3 champions like 18 years in a row. Yeah.
And
I can't remember what the record is, but John was insane.
Brother Justus, he was a Benedictine monk and he built whiskey stills. He was the Abbey distiller and the Abbey blacksmith and tinsmith, and he built whiskey stills for moonshiners in Minnesota during Prohibition and ran them through Benedictine distillation tradition because he's like, if you're going to break the law, you have to serve a higher standard.
Right?
Yeah, whiskey might be illegal, but it's not immoral. But making bad whiskey is always immoral.
Always immoral. 100%.
It might not always be illegal, but it's always immoral. And so that was his thing. And he built dozens and dozens of stills in the Abbey workshop out of pure copper, which was the hardest thing for poor farmers during the farm depression in the 1920s. Because we know the Prohibition side of the story.
Yep.
But Minnesota and the upper Midwest were in deep it was a depression. People were starving. They were losing their homes. They were losing their farms because of grasshopper plagues, because of bad weather, and because of the collapse of grain prices after World War I. Minnesota farmers were feeding Europe and feeding the U.S. troops during World War I. They were growing huge amounts of grain. The war ends. They no longer have a market for it. So it was deep depression that drove people to moonshine. I think it's a really important part of American history to understand.
Well, what are you have to repurpose those grains,
You
right?
have to. It's the only way.
I mean, otherwise you're going to have, I mean, the amount of rot and waste and disease that's going to
Yeah,
come out of that
you,
is insane. So you have to repurpose
you
that.
have to
And guess
repurpose
what?
it. But because they were poor, they didn't have the right equipment. So they were building stills out of sheet metal. Well, it's the sheet metal that if you're a poor farmer that you got galvanized tin from your outbuildings.
Yep.
Your roofing material. So they would take galvanized tin and they would make their stills and solder it with lead.
Oh,
And the galvanized tin has zinc in it, which in
yep.
small amounts is a mineral, right? But in large amounts is a neurotoxin. So when
Yep.
you're boiling up the beer and you're concentrating the beer rain, you're concentrating zinc and lead in the liquid. That's the make you go blind, howl at the moon, right? Moonshine alcohol wasn't any different than today's alcohol. That's not what was making people go crazy. It was the concentrated metals and neurotoxins because of the poor materials that desperate farmers had to use to try to survive. The other thing that they would do, the rot gut part, is farmers everywhere would add lye as an additive at the end of the process because they couldn't refine. They didn't have the right still design and the right technique to concentrate the ethanol and get rid of the heads and tails. And so they would have a watery tasting moonshine at the end of it that's a chemical stew, but because of the methanol and everything else would taste watered down. You try to sell that to, your neighbor who's looking to buy a bottle of hooch, and you
One
get
sip and
you
you're
get a
done.
reputation as watering down your hooch, and you're a German immigrant farmer in a tight-knit community in central Minnesota. That's a death sentence. You're going to be sent off into the desert. So people would add the lye to give it the burn because they couldn't get the whiskey hug from the concentration of the ethanol. So that's where Brother Justus intervened. He's like, I'm the Abbey blacksmith. I'm the Abbey distiller. I'm a monk. I can get as much sheet copper as I want. And the federal government is not going to come into my monastery and say, what are you using all that copper for, brother? And so he would get all that copper and he would build a pure copper stills exactly to the specifications of the Benedictine stills that they'd been using for centuries and generations. And then he would bring them out smuggle them onto local farmers' property and run them through a boot camp. This is how you do your stripping run. This is how you should light your fire. When it gets to this level, start making your cuts, redistill it, do a spirits run now, right? Like he would make people do that. And then he would promise, I'll leave you this still, but you got to promise me to do it the right way every time. And you got to promise me to teach your neighbor what I taught you, because these blessings are not for you alone. They're for the whole community. God doesn't make favorites. You have to, God's blessings are for all.
I love it. And then
so
give 10%.
By mid 1920s, Minnesota had 1,200 whiskey distilleries in our state. And they were making Minnesota 13, but none of them survived repeal because the regulations that were imposed after the repeal of Prohibition, the whole purpose of those was to squeeze out small independent distillers and keep the concentration in the hands of the distributors after World War or after Prohibition. So
I will say it's amazing how wine and beer and has really adapted. It's a much looser regulation program. The amount of regulation on spirits is absolutely absurd, right? I mean, you're right. I mean, there's still regulation laws that go back dang near 100 years, right? Plus, and you're just like, my goodness, and trying to navigate those. I mean, you deal with it obviously as well as we do. Just trying to get something shipped to a warehouse, you got to have 13 different middle people.
Right, yeah. And that's why it's extremely hard to make a living at this business, and maybe the dumbest business to start. But here I am. I'm gonna see it all the way through. You can't tell me I'm too stupid to succeed.
Oh, I tell you what, I love the history lesson of just especially based on the state of Minnesota. And I was reminded when you talk about Brother Justus, you go back to even the fable, if you will. You can call it a fable because I don't know there's 100% accuracy in the Elijah Craig story, but it's very similar from the bourbon stuff, right? Elijah Craig is supposedly a preacher who was created the first bourbon, yada yada yada, so many years ago.
All lies.
Yeah, it's all lies. Yeah, I know. I've read your
this
book
one's
on that.
true. The monks have the records. That's why monks are good. They keep records.
My point being, back in the days, you were right. Like the church was able to balance like the laws, right? So it's like, here you are, and if you made something to a higher standard, you're right. It wasn't necessarily the alcohol killing people; it was the impurities that
That's
that
right.
people were, that
That's
the
exactly
amateurs
right.
were putting into it.
That's exactly right.
But I love those stories. Like I said, the Elijah Craig one was just fascinating. They make a great bourbon.
And we met, I tracked down
But this is super cool.
I tracked kin because as a monk, he didn't have children, but he had nieces and nephews. And so I tracked down and I was able to meet his nephew, the person who was closest to him in his life, and his family. Lawrence passed away in 2022 at the age of 90. And Lawrence had never told these stories to anyone before. He knew about Brother Justus. He knew what Brother Justus had done for the community. He knew that the big, beautiful brick churches in Stearns County with the stained glass that were built in the 1920s and the 1930s during Depression were all built with moonshine money. And they were built, and the moonshiners, the farmers, put it back into the church because they were grateful to what the church had done for them to give them prosperity at a time when the rest of the country was in depression. So but nobody had ever asked him these stories before. His kids knew, but he thought he was going to die without anybody knowing about the true story of what Brother Justus did for Minnesota.
I feel like there's a book in the waiting.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm in. I need a Netflix documentary.
It's part of the plan. I don't know quite how to do it, but maybe you could give me some pointers.
I know a guy.
I love it.
And I'm excited to get your book, Fred. Do you know when it's going to be available?
Yeah, you can pre-order it now.
Okay.
But it drops February 17th.
All right. I'm putting in my pre-order as soon as we're done here. I can't wait to read it. And I'm really touched by your story and what you said about taste mindfulness, because I was watching you last night, and I think that's what we need. I think especially guys, and you were talking about it a little bit earlier, Jared, too, like, especially us guys, we're taught to think that powerlessness is an enemy and emotion is an enemy. And so then we just feel shame, right? Because there are things that are more powerful than us. There are things that no matter how hard we try, we can't push it over, we can't knock it down, and yet we can't give up. And so the ability to connect to our authentic selves and our ability to be mindful and centered in that and acknowledge our vulnerabilities and acknowledge the places where we don't have a lot of power, that actually frees us to use the power we do have to do something good for other people. So
absolutely. I
didn't know that was part of your story. And of course, I've known who you were for a long time, Fred, and the role that you're playing. But I think the good that you're doing and you're going to do by sharing this part of your story and by publishing this book, I think that's going to be your greatest legacy when all is said and done. And I think
Bill, you're going to bring a tear to my eye. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Man.
Well,
I'm not gonna lie. Phil, you're fascinating. You're absolutely fascinating. I'm
great. We gotta have him back.
I'm a Phil Steger fan.
Jared, let's taste through his whole
You can't know what that
portfolio.
means to me as a many years for,
Yes,
for a long
absolutely.
time.
We'll taste the whole portfolio and we'll do another Brothers Justus.
All right, I've got them here. We're going to send them out. You're going to be really fascinated by this one. This is our unaged because it's going to show you exactly what we're doing with the distillate. The only ingredients are malted barley, water, and yeast. That is the only thing in this product. It touches oak. We actually have a barrel that we do put it in so that we can meet the federal regulation for whiskey is. This is our flagship American. This is our everyday sipper where we're trying to get all the balance of what we're talking about. The cold peated, and then the Founder's Reserve is different every year. So I just do it based on what does the whiskey want to say? What does the whiskey want to be this year? And then I just blend it around that.
I love it.
Barrels. So I'm going to send you the first 3 years. You already have 2025. I'll send you 23 and 24 so you can see how they change from year to year, and then Commander's Own. So you're going to be getting a haul.
That's fun. All right, Jared, we're in.
I'm excited. Just let me know when it comes and I'll head up your way.
All right, brother.
All right.
All right, Phil, thank you so much for joining us on such short notice. I couldn't wait to have you on after learning about the brand and seeing how well you did. Everybody like and subscribe to Fourth and Neat. Tell a friend. Go follow Brother Justus on all your socials. And
buy their whiskey. And buy their whiskey.
Check it out.
You ain't on here for his good looks and amazing rhetoric and dialogue.
Stronger if that were the case.
Go buy some whiskey.
Cheers, you guys.
See you guys. Thanks again.